Political analyst James Boyes joins this hour from London. Good to have you with us, James.
Good morning, George.
James, the White House is leaning in on this use of tariffs as a weapon aimed at motivating China, aimed at motivating Mexico, certainly Mexico, on the issue of illegal immigration. The president's team is saying it puts the ball now in Mexico's court. Listen.
One of the biggest things they can do is the repatriation of the thousands of people coming from Central America. They can return them back home. They can stop these massive caravans from coming through their country into ours. That would be a very big first step. Certainly, we've made some progress on the asylum, but we need to do a lot more on that front. And again, we're hopeful that they'll do that.
The question of tariffs as the magic bullet, James, does it work?
Well, it's interesting to hear Sarah Huckabee Sanders there talking about this in regard to an immigration issue, whereas, of course, what the administration is deliberately doing is using this situation, which is, of course, a trade issue. It's not only Mexico, of course, but China, India is in the firing lines, the European Union. All these major trading blocs are in the line of fire for the Trump administration for the imposition of huge tariffs, all of which, of course, is going to impact the American consumer most primarily, because you're going to see, as your report rightly talked about there, a huge rise in the cost of everything, quite frankly, if these tariffs are indeed imposed in the end.
Now, we've heard that before, that other countries would pay for many other things, but as you point out, the experts indicate that taxpayers, Americans, consumers, would end up paying for these tariffs. Let's talk about the timing of this new threat. On the heels of a successful trade agreement reached between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, wouldn't tariffs muddy the water of a deal that has yet to be ratified?
Well, it's very strange because only 2 weeks ago, the Trump administration removed tariffs on steel and aluminium coming in from Mexico and Canada, which seemed to be a good step forward to replacing NAFTA. And now, of course, by muddying the waters, as you rightly put it, by talking about imposition of tariffs, anything up to 25% on Mexico, this, of course, really starts to, I think, call into great dispute whether indeed the administration can get the replacement for NAFTA, which was, of course, a bipartisan agreement passed under the Clinton administration, through. And that's not helped, of course, by his recent attacks upon Speaker Pelosi, who will be vital if indeed this is to progress through Congress.
Let's talk about the internal tug of war that we understand in the White House that's happening, because the president overruled a pair of his top economic advisors in deciding to move forward with tariffs on Mexico, urged on to do so by people like White House trade advisor Peter Navarro and reportedly by Mr. Trump's advisor Stephen Miller, who is known for his hardline approach to immigration. So there are indications that this came together pretty quickly, last minute.
Yeah, and it's troubling, quite frankly, because if there's one thing which is a constant problem with this White House, it seems, it's that they seem not to be able to see the linkage of their policies here. Very clearly, the attempt to use a trade issue to combat immigration might well have some impact upon Mexico in terms of attempting to stem immigration. That's debatable, quite frankly. But what it's certainly going to do is have a huge knock-on effect, not only upon issues to do with pricing within the United States, but of course it could severely deal a death blow to any efforts to try and get the replacement for NAFTA through, which of course was, you know, one of the central points of Donald Trump's candidacy in the first place. And when you consider the idea that he touts himself as, you know, the master of the art of the deal, it seems that the idea of political linkage is a lesson this White House simply refuses to learn.
Switching from my side of the pond now to yours, President Trump set to visit the UK on Monday, and he'll be doing so ahead of comments that he made to the British newspaper The Sun, where he criticized the Prime Minister, Theresa May, for her handling of Brexit. And you'll remember that Ms. May will be stepping down as Prime Minister after Mr. Trump's visit. Mr. Trump also signaling that he thinks Boris Johnson would make an excellent replacement. How will these comments, do you think, how will they affect the president? How will he be received by his British hosts when he arrives?
Well, I think quite honestly, this fits a pattern. When he was in the United Kingdom a year ago, he made not dissimilar comments ahead of his arrival then. When he was here, he also criticised Theresa May, virtually side by side with her at Chequers, saying that he'd have taken a very different approach to dealing with the European Union. I mean, hey, he might have been right, quite frankly, because look at the mess we are in. But there are diplomatic norms which all previous American presidents have taken prior to a visit to the United Kingdom. They will talk up the importance of the special relationship and their relationship with the current Prime Minister. We haven't seen that from Donald Trump. So it does, I think, fit a pattern. So anybody who's surprised by this probably hasn't been paying attention.
The president also reportedly calling Meghan Markle nasty, and he is set to meet with her husband for lunch. James, thank you for your time.
That could be interesting.
Indeed. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, George.